fraud!" she shouted, eyes blazing. The room went completely silent. Pens hovered mid-air. Phones were raised to capture the moment. Investors froze. Edwin Criss, the Billionaire CEO, leaned back in his chair, stunned. What? Edwin's voice was calm, controlled, but a flicker of confusion passed over his sharp eyes. "You heard me," Maya said, stepping forward, voice trembling but fierce. "You're trying to trick them. You're lying. This company, this deal is not real." Richard Hale chuckled, smirking. "Is this some kind of joke? Who does this waitress think she is?" Maya ignored him. Her gaze was fixed on Edwin. "If you sign this, everyone here will lose everything. Your investors, your employees, everyone." Edwin's jaw tightened. "Do you have any idea what you're saying?" "No," Maya admitted, swallowing hard.
"I don't have proof yet," but Maya's hands shook with a truth no one else knew. She was risking everything to save him, and he had no idea why. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let's begin. The restaurant was alive with quiet sophistication. Crystal chandeliers reflected soft light over polished wooden tables, the subtle clink of silverware mixing with murmured conversations. 3 investors sat at the main table, their expressions polite but calculating, sizing up Edwin Criss, the Billionaire CEO, as he outlined plans for his company. Dressed in a crisp navy suit, Edwin exuded confidence and authority, every gesture precise, every word measured. Among the staff, Maya moved quietly, balancing a tray of drinks. Petite, unassuming in her uniform, she could have been overlooked entirely, but today she carried a plan, one that would require everything: courage, timing, and nerve. Her father had been ruined by men, the same men Edwin thinks are investors, and she was determined not to let history repeat itself. "Ladies and gentlemen," Edwin began, voice smooth and confident, "thank you for coming. Today we'll review our projections and opportunities for growth. I promise this will be worth your time." The investors nodded politely,
murmuring small agreements, unaware that the real drama was about to unfold. Maya set her tray down and stepped forward, drawing a sharp breath. "You're a fraud!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the polite murmurs. Time seemed to stop. Glasses hovered mid-air. Phones were lifted instinctively. The 3 investors froze, their polite expressions twisting into confusion and alarm. Edwin Criss leaned back in his chair, stunned, his sharp eyes narrowing as he tried to process the words. What?" he asked, voice calm but edged with disbelief. "You heard me," Maya said, stepping closer, her tone trembling yet fierce. "You're lying. You're trying to trick everyone here. This deal, you're destroying it." The investors exchanged glances. A hush fell over the restaurant. Then one of them, voice trembling slightly, spoke up.
"Edwin, so you're a fraud?" Another nodded, lips pressed tight. "We thought we could trust you, but this is serious." The third investor raised both hands, almost in relief. "Thank you for warning us. Thank you." Their reactions were perfect. They were confidently playing the victim, making it seem as if Maya had saved them from Edwin's supposed scam. They whispered among themselves, murmuring about needing to reconsider their decisions, then quickly excused themselves, leaving the restaurant. Edwin remained frozen, jaw tight, eyes blazing. He had faced hostile boardrooms, ruthless negotiations, and market betrayals, but never had a waitress publicly accused him of fraud in front of investors. His anger rose, sharp and immediate. Maya tried to step forward to explain. "Sir, please, you don't—" But he waved her off,
his expression cold. "I don't have time for theatrics," he said sharply, turning and leaving the restaurant, leaving Maya standing alone amid the whispers of shocked diners. She exhaled slowly, knowing her plan had worked for now. The investors had left unsettled, her accusation creating enough doubt and tension to buy her time. But Edwin did not yet understand her true intentions, and she had made it clear that he believed he had been betrayed. Her heart pounded, hands trembling, but her gaze remained steady. The game had begun, and she had made the first move. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of Edwin Chris's office, falling on the polished mahogany desk, where piles of reports and contracts lay untouched. Edwin stood behind the desk, fists clenched, jaw tight,
and eyes that burned with a fury few had ever seen. He had spent years building his empire, navigating hostile takeovers, cutthroat deals, and betrayals. Yet nothing had stung like the humiliation he had suffered the day before in his own restaurant at the hands of a waitress he barely knew. Maya's words replayed in his mind like a cruel mantra. "You're a fraud. You're lying. This deal, you're destroying it." Every syllable cut into him, not because they were true, but because they had publicly undermined his authority in front of investors, or so he thought. The three men who had attended the meeting, the investors, had already spoken with their contacts, creating quiet ripples of gossip and concern in the corporate world. For Edwin, the damage wasn't just personal, it threatened the perception of control he worked so hard to maintain. His anger was compounded by the knowledge that Maya had stood there, calm and unwavering, staring him down while the room seemed to hold its breath. He slammed a hand on the desk, making the papers jump slightly. "I won't tolerate this," he muttered, voice low but venomous. "She cannot get away with this." His assistant, a meticulous young woman named Claire, peeked through the door cautiously. "Sir?" "The investors. They left quietly, but there's already some chatter online, and people are talking about what happened yesterday." Edwin's eyes narrowed. Online. His anger flared, hotter now. "A waitress, someone who's supposed to serve tables, is causing my company to be questioned in front of potential partners. Do you understand the magnitude of this, Claire?" I understand, sir," she replied, biting her lip.
But she didn't give any proof, and the investors seemed to trust her interpretation, at least for now. Edwin slammed his fist against the desk again. "Trust her? She accused me of fraud in front of 3 investors, and you say they trusted her interpretation?" His voice cracked with rage, echoing off the office walls. "I want her found. I want her arrested immediately. False accusations, harassment, whatever it takes." Claire hesitated, knowing Edwin's temper and the magnitude of his request. "Yes, sir. I'll call the authorities." Meanwhile, Maya was arriving for her shift at the same restaurant. She moved through the familiar space with the poise of someone who had rehearsed every possible outcome in her mind. Each step was deliberate, controlled, though her heart beat faster than usual. She knew today would be challenging.
The moment she appeared in the restaurant, a commotion began. Police officers had already arrived, and whispers spread quickly among the staff and early patrons. "Is this about yesterday?" one of the servers asked nervously. Maya's calm demeanor did not waver. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin slightly, and smiled faintly to herself. "They don't know the truth yet," she thought. "Patience. Everything will come out in its own time." A uniformed officer approached her quietly. "Maya?" "That's me," she said, her voice steady. "You're under arrest for making false accusations against Edwin Chris yesterday." Maya tilted her head slightly, eyes meeting his with unwavering composure. "I understand." There was no panic, no pleading, no desperate attempt to explain. Her silence and calmness only seemed to unsettle the officer. He had expected hysteria, confusion, perhaps even an attempt to flee. Instead, Maya walked calmly toward the patrol car, her thoughts focused on what truly mattered, the protection of Edwin's company and the exposure of the real threat, hidden behind layers of deception. In the patrol car, the city moved past in blurred lines. Maya stared out the window, the familiar streets of her neighborhood reflecting a strange mixture of normalcy and tension. Her mind wandered to her father, the way his business had crumbled, the sleepless nights and the betrayal that had haunted her family. I will not let that happen again, not to him, not to anyone else. This is bigger than me. Back at his office, Edwin paced, muttering to himself, replaying the scene repeatedly. He couldn't understand how someone could be so audacious, so reckless, yet so composed. His anger was still boiling, but now it was tinged with a gnawing frustration. Something about Maya didn't make sense. Her calmness, the way she hadn't run, hadn't cowered. What does she know, he wondered. But pride and anger clouded his curiosity. Instead, he focused on the damage control, contacting PR teams, lawyers, and personal security. Gossip about the restaurant incident was spreading faster than he anticipated. By noon, small threads of the story had begun appearing online, screenshots from diners' phones, whispered rumors, and speculations about the dramatic confrontation. A waitress accused a billionaire of fraud, the headlines teased. Social media buzzed with outrage, curiosity, and disbelief. Edwin's name was trending, not for business achievements, but for scandal. The humiliation was suffocating.
Each notification a fresh reminder of yesterday's chaos. In the holding cell, Maya remained composed. The metallic smell of the station, the fluorescent lighting, the quiet murmurs of other detainees. It all seemed distant. She leaned back slightly, hands folded in her lap, and closed her eyes briefly. They think I've lost, she told herself. They think Edwin will never know the truth, but soon everything will be revealed, and when it is, the real criminals will face justice. An officer brought her some water, and she accepted it with a calm nod. Every interaction was measured, precise. She could have panicked, protested, or cried, but that would have served no one. Instead, she maintained her composure, silently preparing for the confrontation that would inevitably come with Edwin. Meanwhile, in the city outside,
the fallout from yesterday's scene was spreading. The restaurant staff whispered among themselves, gossiping about Maya's bold actions and the strange intensity of the investors' reactions. Some diners who had witnessed the incident speculated online, sharing short videos from their phones. A minor scandal had begun to ripple outward, hinting at corporate intrigue and personal drama. Edwin, unaware of the full picture, felt the pressure mounting. His legal team had begun discussing possible strategies, the PR department was crafting statements, and his assistants were fielding calls from curious clients and partners. The public perception of control, the very thing Edwin had spent years cultivating, was threatened. And yet the source of the disruption, the young waitress who had dared to challenge him, remained calm, silent, and unbroken. The day dragged on, each hour feeling heavier than the last. Maya sat quietly, observing the world outside the small, barred window of her temporary confinement. The tension was palpable, not just for her, but for those who had witnessed the fallout indirectly through whispers, screens, and rumors. Viewers might wonder what she knew, why she had acted so boldly, and how a single person could shake the empire of a billionaire with just words. As night approached, Maya allowed herself a small, controlled smile. The room was silent now except for distant footsteps and the occasional murmur of guards. She thought of Edwin, imagining his frustration, his anger, and perhaps the creeping doubt that something about yesterday's events didn't add up. She couldn't intervene yet, couldn't reveal the truth. Not until the timing was right. And so she waited. The interrogation room was cold, the harsh fluorescent light casting sharp shadows across the grey walls. A single metal table separated Maya from the two officers seated opposite her. The atmosphere was tense, sterile, and suffocating. Maya's hands were folded calmly in front of her, eyes steady, mind focused. A door opened with a quiet click, and Edwin Criss stepped in. His presence filled the room immediately, tall, imposing, a figure of authority whose very posture demanded attention. Yet today there was something different in his gaze, suspicion, anger, and a flicker of confusion. "Maya, one officer began, voice clipped. "We need to understand why you accused Edwin Criss of fraud yesterday. This is serious." Maya met the officer's gaze, nodding slightly. "I understand." Edwin's voice cut in sharply, his anger barely contained. "Explain yourself. Why did you publicly accuse me in front of those investors? You humiliated me. You put my company at risk." Maya's lips curved into a small, controlled smile. She did not flinch, did not lower her gaze. "I needed to act," she said softly, carefully choosing her words. "And I couldn't let you know why at the time." Edwin's brow furrowed. "You mean this was intentional? This wasn't some random outburst?" "Exactly," Maya replied. She took a breath, steady and deliberate. "Those investors, they weren't real investors. They were fraudsters. Men who have been planning to take advantage of your company, just like they ruined my father's business years ago." The words hung in the air like a weight. Edwin's eyes widened slightly, skepticism battling curiosity. "Fraudsters? You're telling me the people I trusted were con artists?" "Yes," Maya said, her voice firm. "I knew their tactics because of what happened to my father. I studied them, their methods, their ways of deceiving people in positions like yours. Yesterday I had to act, accuse you falsely, create a scene so they would panic and leave."
It was the only way to protect you and your company. For a moment, the room was silent. Even the officers seemed to pause, caught in the tension of the revelation. Edwin leaned back slightly, processing her words. Anger still lingered in his posture, but the sharp edge had softened, replaced by a dawning realization. "You risked everything for me." His voice was low now, curiosity threading through disbelief. Maya met his gaze steadily. "Yes, I risked my job, my reputation, even my freedom. But it was worth it. I couldn't let your company fall into the hands of those men, just like my father lost everything to people like them. I couldn't watch you suffer the same fate." A flashback ran through her mind, brief but vivid. Her father, in his office, papers scattered.
A polite smile masking betrayal as the men he trusted siphoned his company away. The long nights of sleepless worry, the hopeless calls, the empty eyes of someone forced to watch his life crumble. She felt that pain again, fueling her resolve. Edwin's eyes softened slightly, the fury from the previous day giving way to awe. You knew exactly what you were doing. You weren't just reckless. You planned it. You saved us all from disaster." Maya nodded, though her expression remained calm and composed. "I couldn't let anyone else fall victim. The company, your employees, your reputation, it all matters. I had to act." For the first time, Edwin's anger gave way completely. He was quiet, almost speechless, absorbing the weight of her words. The courage it had taken for a waitress, someone he had underestimated, to act so decisively in the face of potential ruin. "You're remarkable," he finally said, voice low, a mixture of admiration and disbelief. I don't know what to say." Maya's eyes softened slightly, though she said nothing. Her focus remained on the truth she had risked so much to protect. The officers exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to respond. One finally asked, "So, the accusations weren't directed at him? It was a calculated move?" Maya nodded. "Exactly. I couldn't let him see it coming. If he had known the fraudsters might have tried something else, or worse, they could have succeeded. I had to make it look like I was attacking him so they would flee." Edwin ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly. The shock was evident. Anger and betrayal had turned into astonishment, realization, and finally, respect. "All this time, I thought you were reckless, brash, even dangerous. But now, I see. You were protecting me, protecting this company." Maya allowed herself a small exhale of relief, though she remained poised. "It's not over," she said quietly. "The fraudsters, they'll come back if we don't act. But now you know, and we can stop them together." Edwin stood still, staring at her. His mind was racing, thoughts colliding with newfound admiration. He had misjudged her entirely. Someone he had seen as a mere waitress had orchestrated a plan to safeguard his empire, risking everything without asking for recognition or reward. The revelation hung in the room, heavy and undeniable. The twist, the truth behind her bold, seemingly reckless accusation was now out in the open. Edwin remained silent, shock and awe battling the remnants of his earlier anger. Finally, he sank into the chair across from her, exhaling slowly. "Maya, I underestimated you. You saved this company, you saved me, and I don't know how to thank you." Maya's lips curved into a faint smile, but she did not speak. Words were unnecessary. The weight of what she had done and the courage it had taken was clear to everyone in the room. Outside the interrogation room, the city had begun to buzz with rumors about the scandal, but inside a quiet shift had occurred. Edwin's perception had changed. He no longer saw her as reckless or defiant. He saw her wisdom, her courage, and the selflessness that had guided her every move. The morning sun cut through the blinds of Edwin Chris's office, casting long shadows across the room. The events of the past few days still hung heavy in the air. But today, the atmosphere was different, calmer, charged with a subtle anticipation. Edwin sat behind his desk, a stack of legal documents to one side, but his attention was entirely on the person standing before him. Maya, now free from the brief but tense detention, had returned to the office, not as a suspect, but as a quiet force of courage. She stood there, poised, calm and unyielding, her eyes holding the same fire as they had the day she accused him in the restaurant. Edwin leaned back in his chair, his hands clasped together, a mixture of gratitude, respect, and lingering disbelief etched across his face. For the first time in years, he felt both humbled and awed. "Maya," he began, voice steady but carrying an unusual softness, "I owe you an apology. And more than that, my gratitude. I acted hastily yesterday. You didn't attack me, you saved me, and you saved this company." Maya allowed herself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Thank you, sir. That's all I wanted." Edwin shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "No, that's not enough. You risked your freedom, your reputation, even your safety. You acted on courage, foresight, and integrity. I misjudged you, and I won't make that mistake again." He rose from his chair and gestured toward a file on the desk. "Everything has been investigated. The so-called investors, the ones who attended the restaurant meeting, they're not who they claim to be. Your instincts were correct. Their plan was to manipulate, deceive, and take advantage of my company. Just as you feared, we've already started taking steps to bring them to justice." Maya nodded, her thoughts briefly flashing to her father's ruined business, the long nights she spent learning about corporate fraud, and the careful planning that had allowed her to act without exposing herself too early. It had all been worth it. Edwin continued, his voice gaining warmth and sincerity. "To acknowledge your bravery, I'm not just releasing you from any potential charges, I want to reward you. Consider this an official recognition of your role in protecting this company. You will be promoted, given authority to oversee critical investor relations, and, financially, you'll be compensated for the risk you took." Maya's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly regained composure. "Sir, I don't need recognition. But the truth, that's reward enough for me." Edwin smiled faintly, shaking his head. "Perhaps, but it's more than deserved. You acted when no one else could or would. You showed courage, intelligence, and loyalty. Those qualities cannot go unrewarded." A small knock at the door interrupted the moment. Claire, Edwin's assistant, peeked inside. "Sir, the legal team has begun the process to identify and apprehend the fraudsters. They're compiling evidence, and it looks like arrests will be made soon." Edwin nodded, his expression solemn. "Good. It's time they face the consequences of their actions, and it's all thanks to Maya." He turned to her again. "You didn't just save the company, you saved countless employees, investors, and the reputation we've worked so hard to build. You changed the course of all of this with your bravery. Maya's chest swelled with quiet pride. She had never acted for reward or recognition, but there was a satisfying relief in seeing the world align with the truth. The real criminals, the men who would have destroyed Edwin's empire, were being exposed. The risk she had taken had paid off in ways she could have only hoped for. Edwin's eyes met hers, unwavering. "I want everyone to know what you did, but I also want it done right. I'll announce your role publicly, but with discretion. You'll be recognized for courage, not scandal." Maya nodded. "I appreciate that, sir." The tension that had dominated the past days, the fear, uncertainty, and stakes of secrecy, finally began to dissipate. The uncertainty that had hung over both Maya and Edwin was replaced with a sense of relief, justice, and clarity. Outside the office, news of the fraudster's exposure began to circulate quietly within corporate circles. Whispers of investigation, arrests, and accountability hinted at the consequences that awaited the men who had sought to manipulate and deceive. Maya had not only protected Edwin and his company, but had set in motion a chain of justice that would affect the guilty parties directly. Edwin returned to his desk and gestured for Maya to sit. "Take this moment," he said. "You've earned it. I know you didn't do this for reward, but I want you to know that your courage will never be forgotten in this company, or by me." Maya's expression softened, a small, serene smile gracing her lips. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." As she left the office, she could feel the weight of what had transpired begin to lift. The days of tension, risk, and careful planning were behind her. The fraudster's plan had failed, Edwin's company was safe, and her role, though quiet and initially misunderstood, was finally acknowledged. Outside, the city carried on, unaware of the quiet heroism that had just unfolded in the corridors of corporate power. But for those involved, the billionaire, the brave young waitress, and the criminals who had tried to manipulate the system, the story was far from forgotten. In that moment, Maya understood the full measure of what courage meant: to act decisively when others hesitated, to stand firm even when misunderstood, and to risk everything for the sake of truth and justice. And though the public might never fully know the story behind the bold accusation, the outcome was clear. Integrity had won, bravery had been recognized, and the threat of corruption had been halted. The city was buzzing with news, but this time it wasn't scandal or gossip, it was justice. The three men who had infiltrated Edwin Chris's company under the guise of investors had been identified, their schemes meticulously documented by a joint investigation led by corporate authorities and Edwin's legal team. Arrest warrants had been issued, and by the end of the week, the fraudsters were taken into custody, facing charges that could keep them behind bars for years. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.